Hello everyone, and welcome to the Set 16 Departed deck list review video. I do want to give a small disclaimer before we start that I may go into some more extra detail, and maybe if you're familiar with the game it might seem a little excessively obvious, but I know with the new starter decks it seems like there's a decent amount of people just starting the game, so I'm trying to at least just be accommodating for them in any weird interactions or anything like that that should be kind of taken note of as for a new person, especially with Departed, since it is a very complex and interactive deck, especially compared to most decks I can think of off the top of my head. I've been playing this deck for God knows how long, and it just feels like it keeps getting more and more complex. So yeah, let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to do here is review the cards real quick. Then the second is the different interactions that the deck can have. And then due to the price of cards, I'm also going to have an extra cards options for the deck for people who might have issues getting certain staples or just don't have the money for the staples. Especially considering the price right here with all like the base rarity, it's already on Shadow Showdown here shown as like almost $400. Which I think can actually be mitigated more because the price of things like Ice Shellendrig or Ilgano are not based off of the Showdown decks, which are like roughly $20. And just the Ice Shellendrigs here from set 11, these are set 11 Ice Shellendrigs. These just pay for the starter decks themselves, and you still get a whole bunch of extras. So yeah, just kind of keep that in mind that despite this being $400, you can budget it to actually make it cheaper. So let's just start. We'll go from left to right and just reviewing the cards. This deck list, I have been working on this deck list for the past week. I swear to God, I've changed it about 5 times now, and I think I've kind of got it into a pretty good spot. Obviously, based on your local meta or just how competitive or not competitive / casual you are with your friends and stuff, obviously you can change things around. This is kind of assuming you have all the cards available to you, this is probably at least like a good starting point for building the deck. But like I said, I'm going to get into alternative options after the review in case you need to make budgetary options. So first is Soul Conversion. It is a 1-cost spell that says quick, select a follower on your field, destroy it, and draw 2 cards. This is a pretty standard card for this deck, especially since we're kind of leaning more into the Departed archetype in this format than the previous formats where I felt like it's more Necrocharge. Soul Conversion is a Departed archetype card, which is relevant for later, which I'll get to, but pretty good. You do a decent amount of self-sacrificing of your own cards, so just being able to consistently draw a little bit more and just get your Necrocharge up and just keep your hand full is always a good thing. Some deck lists seem to run 3. I like 2. I feel like when I run 3, I always feel like I see extra copies of this card that it's just almost frustrating. It's like when I see it, when I run it at 3, when I see it, I always see like 2 copies, and it's just like I don't need 2 copies. And I don't need to draw into more copies of Soul Conversion. So 2 seems like the healthy amount where you see it when you kind of want it, but it's not like clogging up your hand. Next is Dead to Rights. It is a quick spell for 1. We're going to skip the top part for a moment, but the main effect is you select an enemy follower on the field and give it -2/-2. This is basically a better version of another neutral spell called Angelic Snipe. And for the new people who might not know what Angelic Snipe is, it's basically a 1-cost quick neutral spell that says select an enemy follower on the field and deal 2 damage. Not -2/-2, just deal 2 damage, which can be relevant mainly because dealing damage is different than a stat reduction of -2/-2, and you're also just reducing attack as well. So if you reduce a 2/3 follower, it's a 0/1, and it's still on the board, but it's essentially just kind of a lame duck. It's just sitting there not doing anything, and your opponent more than likely will just have to run it into an enemy, into one of your own followers, just to kill it off and free up the space. So it has more utility than just dealing 2 damage. And also the only card I can think of off the top of my head that it's relevant for is Parkour Werewolf, but there are just a couple off cards that say they can't take ability damage, which Dead to Rights is not ability damage, it is stat reduction, so it gets around things like that. The only card I can think of off the top of my head right now is Parkour Werewolf. This at least, reduces its stats by 2 too, so it makes it a little bit easier to deal with. The other effect is when it's in the cemetery, you can banish this copy of Dead to Rights and a copy of Ice Shillandrig Gilded Autocrat from your cemetery and select an enemy follower on the field and engage it. That is a effect that I'll get into later, but just kind of take note of it. It is a useful later game ability. Next up is Ilgano, Horror Stray. She's a 1-cost 1/1, and normally for followers, I just kind of go from top to bottom, where I talk about the fanfare, then the last words. But in this case, Ilgano is a weird exception, where most of the game, you're actually going to mainly be doing her last words, and then only into the late game, or mid-game at the very least, you'll be doing her fanfare effect. So we'll start with the last words. Last words says, put this card into the owner's EX area, bury the top card of your deck. So essentially, whenever she dies, as long as she's not banished, which is usually a Haven Craft thing, she will just go back to your EX area. And basically, in order to replace her in the cemetery, you just mill the top card of your deck and put it into your cemetery. And so she's a great way to recursively keep playing things like Soul Conversion, just as like a quick example of why she's good. Again, I don't want to get into all the combos right now, but you could basically just, it's very common for me to just be like, turn 1, play Ilgano, pass. Turn 2, comes back around, swing with Ilgano for 1, hit, kill Ilgano with Soul Conversion, draw 2, mill a card, and then just replay Ilgano for the turn. And it's just like, cool, free cycle. You never lost her because she just goes back into your EX area. So she's just a really solid card. Her fanfare says, select a Wasteland follower that costs 3 or less in your cemetery, and if you have Necrocharge 10, you may summon it. So I have had, just keep in mind, I haven't had instances where I've had Necrocharge 10, but I don't want to summon anything back yet. So it is optional. You don't have to do it. So you may summon it, and if you do, you banish Ilgano, so then her infinite loop of coming back with her last words finally stops because she's banished, and banish is different than last words. Last words only triggers when she's sent to the cemetery. Next up in the 2-cost category is Arcus, Spirited Manager. He's a 2-cost 5/5. He's pretty beefy. However, he can't attack enemies, and this includes both leaders and followers. Even if he somehow gets rushed or storm or something, he cannot attack. However, at the start of your main phase, if you do have Necrocharge 10, you do get to summon a ghost token, which it can happen like mid to late game, but that's kind of not the biggest reason why you play him. The big thing is his act ability here, where you can bury another follower and choose one of the following. You can only activate it once per turn. You can either draw a card, you can either summon 2 ghost tokens, or bury the top 2 cards of your deck. If you do play him like turn 2, you could always also just sack Ilgano. And normally at this point in the game, with how early it is, you just want to bury the top 2, and then Ilgano will also mill you 1. So it's just like turn 2, milling 3. It's really strong to just get the engine going. He also has some good late game application as well, but we'll get into that later. But he is a decent option, and even the 2 ghost tokens actually comes in handy later. Funny enough, as much as you would think the draw card would be like the most common thing you do with him, that is like the last thing I think I ever do with him. I don't think I ever actually draw a card off of him unless I'm like super desperate. Next up is one of the bigger, more expensive cards in the deck, Gremry Death Teller. She's a 2-cost 2/3 with Ward, and on fanfare, you bury the top 2 cards of your deck. She has another ability that when she's in your cemetery, you may pay 1 to summon her back from the cemetery, but you also give her banish this card, so then she basically is gone for the rest of the game once she finally dies. But upon summoning her, you do reactivate her fanfare, so you mill 2 more. And also, you can only activate this effect if there are at least 10 cards in your cemetery. I'm not sure why they don't just say Necrocharge 10, but if there are at least 10 cards in your cemetery, and there is no other cards named Gremry Death Teller on your field. So do keep in mind that sometimes sequencing can matter, where you have a Gremry in hand and you have a Gremry in cemetery, and let's just say you have Necrocharge 10 already. You have to sequence it right, where you have to play, if you want to play both, you have to summon the one from the cemetery back first, and then you can play the one from hand for 2 play points. You can't play the one from hand for 2 and then just be able to summon the one from the cemetery, because at that point there's already a Gremry on the board, so you can't activate the cemetery Gremry's effect. So a small bit of sequencing, but if you're kind of like in a more competitive situation, like that can make or break games. Next up is Kagero. It's another 2-cost follower that has 2 attack and 2 defense. And as Necrocharge 10, this follower has Russian Bane. This is just a continuous effect where it's just always checking to see if you're at Necrocharge 10, even if let's say you're at Necrocharge 8 and he's already on the board, and then you play something like Grimoire to mill 2 more. Once you hit 10, he just sees that there is 10 and you can just swing with him. There is no like summon checking or anything like that. The fanfare effect says you can choose one. The main one you'll do, I'm going to skip the first one for a second. The main one you'll probably do with him most of the time is bury the top 2 cards of your deck. So again, more milling. And if you have Necrocharge 10, you could always just run him into something. So, you know, he also could count himself as also adding another card into the cemetery. However, the secondary, more like super late game effect is you can select a Soul Strike in your cemetery and put it into your EX area. And if you have Necrocharge 20, it costs 2 less to play. Soul Strike, we're running it at 1 in here, and it's just a 2-cost spell that says select an enemy follower on the field and deal 4 damage. And if you have Necrocharge 20, you deal 4 damage to its leader. So it's mainly meant to be like a late game. You have Necrocharge 20. You can basically, you know, you play Kagero from the cemetery, which we'll get to in a little bit, but basically you can bring him back from the cemetery, grab back Soul Strike. Soul Strike's free because you have Necrocharge 20, and you play it, deal 4 to something, and then deal 4 to the leader as well, all for free. So it doesn't happen every game, but it is there. This deck is very toolboxy, so there's going to be a decent amount of like 1-ofs or just like 2-ofs that kind of work as toolboxy options. So you'll see as we get along here. So next 2-cost and final 2-cost is Gold Rush Ghost. It is a 2-cost 2/2 and it has Storm, so you can just instantly punch with it. However, I'm going to skip the fanfare for a second. However, at the start of the opponent's end phase, you bury him, so he never gets to survive until your next turn. This fanfare says you get to choose 1. If this was put onto the field from the cemetery, you can actually choose up to 2 instead, and you can choose up to 2 is optional. And the reason why I say that is because late game, there are instances where you are getting low on cards in deck, and you don't want to mill yourself, which is the second option here, to bury the top 2 cards of your deck. Sometimes you actually just don't want to do that because you're going to like almost die. The first effect, but the second one I'm talking about, is you get to summon an Arcane Personnel Carrier token and give your leader 1 defense. I usually refer to this token as an APC token, just because it's a very long token name. The APC token is this. It's a 1-cost token, but it doesn't matter because it'll just be on the board. And it says, bury this, you select a follower on your field, give it ward, and then if it's a wasteland follower, give it 1 defense. Do keep in mind that this is kind of 2 separate things. You can give a follower ward, but unless it's a wasteland follower, it won't get the 1 defense, which is actually a little relevant. All the wasteland cards are kind of phrased this way, where any card can kind of get half the effect, but if you want the full effect, you got to crack it on a wasteland follower. However, that being said, there's a lot of times where it's actually perfectly okay just to crack this on a normal follower, and it's totally good. So, but that's the APC token that Gold Rush Ghost can make. Next up is Mukon Shadow Crypt Ward. He's a 3-cost 3/3 that has no effect on the base form. However, his evil form is where all the benefit happens. His evolve form says that whenever a follower is put onto the field, give your leader 1 defense. And on evolve, you select a departed follower in your cemetery that costs 3 or less and summon it. And on super evolve, you select a departed follower in your cemetery that costs 3 or less and summon it and give it a sail. When you super evolve, you actually do both of these, so you can actually summon 2 departed followers that are 3 or less. There's a lot of really interesting combinations of cards you can do with him. I've been like trying to figure out at least all the relevant combos with him and the different 3-cost or less departed followers that you can summon back with him. And it's kind of good to know what these options are, especially since sometimes it can be random what cards are in your cemetery. So you kind of want to know what you have and what you're working with beforehand before you evolve / super evolve. But this card, despite it saying you can only heal once per departed follower, and even though you think innately, okay, well, I think I can just like heal 2 off of just Mukon, you can actually easily heal 5, which I'll get into in a little bit, but you can actually heal a decent amount, which based on the meta, with 7-cost dragon being very relevant in the meta, the healing really helps against 7 costs. So yeah, really powerful card, and he's the only card that can super evolve in this deck, so that's relevant too. Next up is Wretch. He is a 3-cost 3/2 with Rush. He can evolve, however, you can only activate this if the follower is put onto the field from the cemetery. So if you just hard play it from the hand, you can't evolve him. And he has last word, summon a bullet bike token and bury the top 2 cards of your deck. The bullet bike token is a 1-cost spell that says you can basically bury this token to select a follower on your field, give it rush, and if it's a wasteland follower, give it +1 attack. This is kind of the opposite effect of the APC token, where the APC token says give something ward, which is a defensive keyword, and 1 defense, which is defensive. The bullet bike gives rush, which is offensive, and 1 attack, which is obviously more of an offensive thing than defensive. So kind of keep that in mind with how you're kind of maneuvering your turns. But the wretches, though, like I said, the wretch can evo for 1 into a 4/3, and it gets storm and an on-evolve effect to select an enemy follower on the field and deal 5 damage, which effectively kills pretty much anything other than like 7-cost dragon cards. And then it still retains the last words of getting a bullet bike and burying the top 2 cards of your deck. This is another alternative option to super evolve as well, because when you super evolve, the card also gets +1/+1, which I should also specify that Mukon here as well becomes a 5/5 if you super evolve him. So pretty good stats there, but this also becomes a 5/4. So if you need that little bit of extra reach, and then even if you have like a bullet bike or 2 on the board, crack on it, it could become like a 6 attack or 7 attack, and really kind of reach out for that extra bit of damage for game. So really good, both control and just aggression. Next for the 3 costs, and it's the last 3 cost, is 1 copy of Great Pick Corpse. He's a 3-cost 3/3 that on fanfare you can bury another card and select an enemy follower on the field and deal 4 damage. Then once per turn, when a 1-cost token card you control leaves the field, you get to summon a token of the same name. So do keep in mind with the fanfare, first off, it's optional. There is a colon here, which means everything to the left is a cost, and costs are optional for the effects. But obviously, if you don't pay for the effect, you don't get the resolution of the effect. The other thing is the once per turn when you crack a 1-cost token, that is mainly in reference to bullet bikes and the APC tokens. So you could potentially give 2 different followers ward and or extra defense, or give 2 followers rush and or extra attack. You can even crack the extra one on the same follower if you want to give extra attack or extra defense. Up to you. I run it at 1 copy because it is mainly used for Mukon. However, it is possible that it could be used for some combos, and along with, you could also just crack it on Ilgano to kill her and deal 4 damage to something, and she just goes back to your EX area as well. There is more to this card than just what I'm saying here, but just for the sake of moving on, we're just going to go on to Chris Beyond the Patch. He's a 4-cost 4/4, which is insanely statted for a card with a really good fanfare, which the fanfare says you get to select an enemy follow, or select a Abyss follower not named Chris Beyond the Patch that costs 5 or less in your cemetery, and if you have Necrocharge 10, you summon it and give it ward. The obvious choice is, I'm going to skip Cerberus for a second, but the obvious choice that you mainly would probably bring back is like Shillendra Gilded Autocrat, but we'll get to him in a minute. The next card, though, is Cerberus Hellfire Unleashed. She's a 4-cost 3/3 that on fanfare you summon a Mimi Right Paw Hellhound and a Coco Left Paw Hellhound token. And if you have Necrocharge 10, they get Storm, which is crazy. You're basically paying 4 play points for 3, 5, 7 total stats. So it's spread across 3 different bodies. That's pretty good. And then you can also turn her sideways. It has an act ability, turn her sideways, bury another follower. So basically either the Mimi or Coco, usually, I will just specify usually, to select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 2 damage. The Mimi and Coco tokens are, well, this is Mimi here. It's a 1-cost 2/2 follower that has last word, select an enemy follower on the field, deal it 2 damage, and bury the top card of your deck. So it helps with the milling. With the 2 damage here and the 2 damage from Cerberus, you could spread 4 total damage. You could either do it on 2 different followers, or if it's just you got like a 4/4 enemy follower on the board, just deal it all on 1 follower. And then the Coco token is very similar, same stats, 1-cost 2/2. However, its last words are you heal 2 and you bury the top 2 cards of your deck. So yeah, you kind of sacrifice what you need for what you need in the situation. If they just have, let's say, 1 follower that just has like 1 or 2 defense that you just want to kill with Cerberus, just sacrifice the Coco. and heal 2 and kill the follower and bury 1 card. But if it is kind of like either like you got to split the damage between 2 different followers or just kill 1 bigger follower, just you can sacrifice Mimi and deal 2 to 2 different followers or 4 to 1 follower. On to Ice Shillandrig. He is a 5-cost 5/5 Ice Shillandrig Gilded Autocrat. He evolves for 1, and on summon, if there is no Magic Train on your field, you summon 1. And whenever he becomes engaged, each opponent discards a card as well. His evolve is where it all matters. On evolve, he becomes a 6/6, and his on evolve ability says discard a card, select 2 followers in your cemetery, and add them to your hand. Whenever this card becomes engaged, each opponent discards a card. And during your turn, whenever a player discards a card, select an enemy follower on the field and engage it. So, between his on evolve and then becoming engaged ability, which is really easy to do with the Magic Train, which we'll get to in a second. But between the on evolve and this ability, you're basically going to be engaging 2 enemy followers, which plays perfectly into what the Magic Train does. The Magic Train is a 5-cost 4/5 amulet, so it has stats, but it doesn't have stats all the time innately. In order for it to become a follower with stats, you have to pay 1 play point, tap any number of followers that costs a total or 5 or more on your field. So basically Ice Shillandrig at this moment, without getting into more detail. And you can maneuver the card for the turn. And so for the rest of the turn, it becomes a 4/5 follower. It has a rush, so it can swing into an engaged enemy follower on the first turn it's played. And then on strike, you can select an engaged enemy follower on the field, destroy it, and give your leader 2 defense. So the perfect situation, which doesn't always happen, but the perfect situation is your opponent has 2 followers that are standing. You play Ice Shillandrig. Let me just kind of show them real quick to make it easier to visualize. But you play Ice Shillandrig, you get the train, you evolve him for 1. Into his 6/6, you discard a card from your hand, grab back 2 followers, then you get to engage an enemy follower on their field because a player has discarded a card during my your turn, or I guess my turn if I'm talking about myself. And then with the train, you pay 1 play point and you tap Ice because he's a 5-cost to maneuver the train, so the train becomes real. And then his effect activates that whenever he becomes engaged, your opponent discards a card. And so then, since during your turn, whenever a player discards a card, in this case it's your opponent, you select an enemy follower on the field and engage it. So that engages the second card. The discard is your opponent's choice. It is not random. You don't get to choose. That is your opponent's choice, which is fine. You just need the discard. That's all that matters. And then the Magic Train has rush, and so it can rush into the smaller follower, and then strike, it can destroy the stronger follower, and you can heal 2. That makes, because of this strike effect, it is real hard to kill the train unless your opponent has like some quick way to deal with it, like with a quick spell. Because what happens at the end of the turn, for the people who are newer to the game, when this turns back into an amulet at the end of the turn, even though it took combat damage when it was a follower, when it goes back to being an amulet at the end of the turn, it loses all its stats. So then when you remaneuver the train next turn, it just becomes a 4/5 again, and it just refreshes its stats essentially, which is really powerful, and it makes it tough to deal with the train unless there's like some amulet removal as well, which is not very common right now. And because the way the rules are worded, because the Magic Train already existed on your board at the start of your turn, assuming you go to the next turn after you play the Magic Train, right? Because the train was already on the board when you started your turn, the Magic Train now can just punch your opponent for 4 and still strike, destroying an engaged enemy follower and heal 2. So essentially, every turn after the first turn, it's a ticking time bomb of just 4 continuous damage to your opponent's face, if not potentially more, because it is a wasteland card. So when it becomes a wasteland follower, you could actually crack the bullet bike and give it +1 attack to deal even more damage to your opponent. So it's essentially like a ticking time bomb with a little bit of nice healing. The healing isn't like super substantial, but like it is nice. Like I'm not going to complain about healing 2. But the Magic Train is kind of like the inevitability of the deck. And even if your opponent has like some big, let's say 5/5, right? That like that has ward, worst case, when the Magic Train goes to swing at the ward, the strike effect triggers, which kills the engaged ward follower first. before it even fights. So it doesn't even take damage where it take 5 damage and then die to the warded 5/5 follower. The card is just like really tough to get rid of in general. So it's really solid card, which is why the Magic Train and Ice Shielddrake are just running this deck. That was a lot. Next up is a card that's a little simpler. It's Odile Black Swan. It's a 5-cost 6/4 that on Fanfare you deal 2 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field. And if you have Necrocharge 20, she gets Storm, so she can just instantly start swinging. And then she has an on-strike effect that says deal 2 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field as well. So later on in the game, if you're a Necrocharge 20, which actually, by the way, just FYI, you can res her back with Crispy on the patch as well, because she has a 5-cost, and then she gets Ward as well. But she can, late game, once you have Necrocharge 20, just Storm for 10 damage, essentially, and deal 4 damage to the enemy's board, which essentially gets any, like, medium to small followers destroyed easily. And that also gets around cards that might have aura, like Liad, the Crescent Blade, because you're not selecting the card to deal damage. It is just dealing board wiping damage to everything. Next up is 1 copy of Demon Lord Ektar. He's a 7-cost 5/6 that on Fanfare, if you have Necrocharge 10, you can select up to 2 Abyss followers that cost 2 play points or less in your cemetery and put them onto your field and give each other follower on your field +1/+1. However, if you have Necrocharge 20, they get +3/+3 instead. And as long as Ektar is on the board, every Abysscraft follower on the field has Rush. Do keep in mind, it is weirdly worded. However, I do want to specify that the Necrocharge 20 check here is at the moment of Fanfare. So even though it's later on in the effect, it's still checking if the NC 20 exists at the start of Fanfare. So if you're at, let's say, 20 cards in Cemetery exactly when you play Ektar, when you summon back the 2 followers, at Fanfare there were 20 cards in Cemetery, even though you're resing 2 back, so it's 18. So you are still getting the +3/+3 on the followers, even at Necrocharge 20. The weird situation is if you play him and you're at 20 and you res, let's say you res Ektar back from the Cemetery, so you go down to 19. That is when it would still only see 1/1, and you wouldn't get the 3/3 benefit. So just kind of keep that in mind with how you're sequencing things, that you have enough cards in Cemetery when they get rezzed back. But otherwise, this card has a really good combo with the Magic Train and one other card that we're going to talk about in a second, so I'll get into the combo in a little bit. The last card of the deck is Tartarus the Tormentor. It's a 10-cost 7/7, so really big stats. However, you're never going to play this card for the 10 cost, because if there is at least 15 or more departed cards in your cemetery, then he costs 5 less to play. So you can effectively think of him as a super late game 5-cost follower. He evolves for 1, which we'll get into the evolve effect soon. However, you might be thinking, why are you running 3 copies of him if he's a 10 cost and you're only going to see him like hyper late game? And that's because he has an act ability where you can pay 1 play point and put him from your hand into your EX area, and you get to check the top 2 cards of your deck and reveal a departed card from among them and add it to your hand, and then you bury the rest of the cards. And even if you don't reveal a departed card out of the 2, oh no, you mill them into the cemetery where you just like want cards anyway. So it's like, it's never like a bad situation, even if you kind of get screwed trying to find cards. So even just turn 1, like he's perfectly good to have for turn 1 to just be like, I pay 1, I'll put Tartarus in the EX area, check the top 2 cards of my deck, grab a departed follower, bury the other, pass. He's there, he is ready later on in the game, and you are getting, you have the consistency of trying to get things like Ice Shielddrake, he's a departed follower, Chris is a departed follower. Obviously not ideal, but Ektar is a follower if you want to grab him. But the Gold Rush Ghost as well, he is departed. I mean, more than half this deck is departed. Like I said, he evolves for 1 into a 8/8. And on evolve, you select a departed follower in your cemetery and summon it. So the best option is Demon Lord Ektar. But sometimes you do only run 1 copy of him. So sometimes I've had it where Ektar is just like, I had him in the starting hand, and I'm like, I have Ektar in my starting hand, so I have to mulligan him away. And so he's at the bottom 4 cards of my deck. and so you just don't see him, which is fine. Usually the other alternative option is you can also res back Chris beyond the patch, which means you could also, when Chris is summoned, you could also bring back Odile Black Swan and Storm for 20 or 10 damage, because at that point you're probably going to have Necrocharge 20 easily. So even without Ektar, there is other options. As far as Ektar's fanfare effect goes, the most obvious ones you're probably going to summon back are Gold Rush Ghost, because they have Storm. If they get the +3/+3, they become 5/5s, which is insane. You essentially swing for 10 damage with just the 2 Gold Rush Ghosts. The one combo I wanted to mention now is, assuming you have Magitrain on the board already, and you're starting your turn, you play Tartarus, and assuming you have 15 or more departed cards in Cemetery, because, right, this is going to be like late game, you play Tartarus for 5. He is a 5 cost or more, so you can pay 1 to maneuver the train, because you just have to maneuver multiple followers or 1 follower up to a total cost of 5 or more. So you maneuver the train by engaging Tartarus. You evolve Tartarus for 1. You summon back Demon Lord Ektar. Ektar, assuming you're at Necrocharge 20, reses 2 things, so the 2 Gold Rush Ghosts, right? And they become 5/5s with Storm. Even the Gold Rush Ghosts, you probably at this point wouldn't want to bury the top 2 cards of your deck. So you choose the first option to create an APC token and heal. You're not going to create the APC tokens because you don't have the board space. However, you still heal. So cool, heal 2. No complaints there. And then, but also the +3/+3, or I guess maybe worst case scenario, +1/+1, still buffs up the train because it is a follower at this point, because you've already maneuvered it with Tartarus. So, but best case scenario, the train gets +3/+3. It becomes a 7/8. So effectively on board, you have 17 damage with the 2 5/5s of Gold Rush Ghost, and +3 attack on the Magitrain. That's 17. Like, that might as well be game essentially. As long as you've done some modicum of chip damage, which is pretty reasonable. So that is kind of like the late game, like big bomb, like we're finishing this game, it is over with. It doesn't happen every game, no, but that is like the big wombo combo turn essentially. If you don't have Ektar, like I said, you could still do Tartarus, you could still evolve him for 1. You could still maneuver the train, like there's nothing stopping you from maneuvering the train. You could res back Chris beyond the patch, and then off of Chris, you can res back Odile Black Swan. Unfortunately, you can't just res back Odile Black Swan because she's not a departed follower, she's Fable. So you just have to kind of go through the middleman of Chris beyond the patch to summon Odile Black Swan onto the board, and she can still Storm for 10 and deal 4 damage to the whole, enemy's board. So that's just the alternative, like, win con options. Just whichever one is kind of on the board or the situation you need, you just pick which one you need. So on to the other combos. I know I kind of rambled that, but that was right at the end. So other combos I want to mention, circling back around with Il'gyno. As far as stacking Il'gyno, you can, like I mentioned before, you can stack her with Soul Conversion, you can stack her with Arcus, you can stack her with Great Pit Corpse. Otherwise, Il'gyno's fanfare of 3 cost or less Wasteland followers that you can res back. The most common one will probably either be Wretch or Gold Rush Ghost, since they are both Wasteland. And I know it's weird, right? Gold Rush Ghost is only a 2 cost. Well, why don't you get the most bang for your buck with a 3 cost? It's because really at that point, when you're resing stuff back, it's not dependent on what the cost is. It's just what you need. Do you need more defense? Do you need more damage? Do you need more mill? That's easy to do. I know you can mill with Wretch, but it's last words, where Gold Rush Ghost is on summon. It's mill too. And the APC token can get summoned. And it's weird with the APC token because you can give it to Gold Rush Ghost, and it's a weird mind game for your opponent, because your opponent probably wants to get rid of it so then he can start hitting you. However, it feels like a little bit of a wasted resource because you just know Gold Rush Ghost is going to die at the end of your turn anyways. So it feels like kind of like a weird, like I kind of have to hit it, but I feel like I shouldn't have to, so a little bit of mind games, but eventually, like, the opponent's obviously going to do what they need to do. Otherwise, the last option actually you could, I'll talk about Kagero first, because Kagero is also Wasteland Departed, so you could summon Kagero back from Ilgano. Like I said, she summons back a Wasteland follower that's 3 or less. This is less likely. Like I said, most of the time you're either going to do Gold Rush, Ghost, or Wretch, but it is an option late game. If you just want to play Ilgano, get the Kagero, get the Soul Strike, deal 4 damage to something, because you have Necro Charge 20. It is just a possibility. That's why I like it. It is toolboxing for what you need. If you need to evolve something else, but you still want to deal some damage, that's where you can go the Kagero route and just grab the Soul Strike and at least burn the opponent for 4, which is, to be honest, the same amount of damage you do with the Wretch anyway, so it's kind of potato. The last option that you really won't do at all, but I'll kind of explain while it's here in a minute, is Great Pit Corpse. It is a 3 cost Wasteland follower, but like I said, it's kind of the last option, and like, just generally speaking, just don't do it. It's pretty much that clear, but I just want to specify that it is an option, just not a great option. As far as, I think I already mentioned with Arcus, you can bury Ilgano to get more benefits off of Arcus. Let's see, Grimory is pretty much Grimory. Mukon, so Mukon is where there's a lot of possibilities and a lot of thinking to do. Because with the Super Evolve, you get to summon 2 Departeds back, you have to kind of think of how you want to sequence the cards you bring back as well, and how they best deal with the board that you're dealing with against your opponent. One of the most common ones, so there's a couple of common combos you can do with resing 2 things back. The one I think that is pretty solid, if you're able to do it, is summon a copy of Gold Rush Ghost and summon a copy of Arcus on the Super Evolve, obviously. Reason being is you summon them both. Gold Rush Ghost triggers, you bury the top 2, so it helps towards your Necro Charge. And at this point, you're probably still needing to mill. And you get their APC token and you heal 1, which means off of Mukon, you will heal 1 from summoning Gold Rush Ghost, heal 1 from Gold Rush Ghost Fanfare, heal 1 from Arcus's Fanfare, or no, not from Arcus's Fanfare, but Arcus's Summon. Then you can swing with the Gold Rush Ghost into your opponent for 2. Use Arcus to sacrifice the Gold Rush Ghost, because in your mind you're like, he's going to die anyways at the end of the opponent's turn, who cares if he dies now. Summon 2 Ghost tokens, because Ghost tokens are Departed. They are Departed attributes. So then that would trigger Mukon again, and you heal 2 more. So at this point, you're healing 5. The APC token, you might think, oh, well, it's unfortunate that, you're having to sacrifice the Gold Rush Ghost, because you'd want to give the APC token to the Gold Rush Ghost. But just give it to Arcus instead. He gets Ward. He's a 5/5. Like, that's better stats than the Gold Rush Ghost. And you can just tap him. He can't attack anything anyways, but if your opponent attacks him, he does reciprocate the damage back to the opponent. So, yeah, he's just a good beefy wall. Worst case, you could give it to Mukon, especially when you Super Evolve, he actually becomes a 5/5. So that can help with defense as well. The other option, which I don't feel like a lot of people are talking about, but it seems pretty solid, but it seems like something that is not super conditional to everything, is summoning Great Pit Corpse and Wretch off of Mukon, because it is 2 3 costs or less Departed followers, so you'll heal 2 from those 2. Then what you can do is have Great Pit Corpse bury the Wretch to deal 4 to an enemy follower. The Wretch triggers, you mill 2, you get the Bullet Bike. You can crack the Bullet Bike on the Great Pit Corpse, and you can also, by the way, give the Great Pit Corpse a sail. So then you can crack the Bullet Bike on the Great Pit Corpse, and he becomes a 4/3 with Rush and a Sail, so you can run him into something. So that's enough damage there between the Fanfare and the Great Pit Corpse stats, where you could actually run this into Burnite. If she's just standing there and you can't deal with her, or you don't want to bury an Ice and a Dead to Rights in the cemetery, that's another option as well to deal with Burnite. The other option with Great Pit Corpse is Gold Rush Ghost and Great Pit Corpse. You summon the Gold Rush Ghost, you get the APC token, you summon the Great Pit Corpse. You could sacrifice, well, you probably would mainly sacrifice the APC token to deal 4 damage to something, but then the APC token comes right back because it's a 1 cost. And so then you could still crack the APC token. Even on Great Pit Corpse, it becomes a 3/4 with Ward. Like, that's not bad stats. So, a little bit of play there. The other thing to take note of the Great Pit Corpse in general is the Mimi and Coco tokens are 1-cost amulet cards as well. So if you have like a weird turn where you play Cerberus for 4 and either Great Pit Corpse is played as well or he's already on the board, you could run this into a follower to deal 2 damage, because by that point it would have Storm from the Cerberus, and then deal 2 damage as well to the same follower or a different follower. Or you could potentially double heal and like swing this into Coco. Coco gets rezzed back and then swing it again and heal another 2, and both times you're burying as well. So all the tokens you're playing here, and even the ghosts, now I think the ghosts are going to be like way more of a stretch to potentially duplicate, but the possibility is there that you could res back ghosts as well to get a little bit of extra chip damage or something with Great Pit Corpse. So like there is weird interactions with the Great Pit Corpse in like almost all the amulets except for just the Magic Train. So it's very, very interesting. Cerberus as well, I think is the last like bit of combo I can think of at the moment. Is she is a 4-cost 3/3. However, she does summon Mimi and Coco, which are 1 costs. And so if push comes to shove, you could play Cerberus for 4, engage her and one of the Mimis or Cocos to maneuver the train. It's not something I think will be done every game or every turn, but you can effectively kind of think of Cerberus as like a pseudo 5-cost because of the tokens she does create. So there is a lot of weird interactions and proper sequencing. So I like this deck because it feels like it's very skill intensive. Like you can build this deck, but if you don't know how to play it, then like you're still going to suck. That's what I appreciate about this game, is it does feel like it's not about what deck you build. It's just like how you navigate the deck and pre-plan, running the deck. So that's the deck. Now, because of obviously the price, I do have some alternative departed options as well. I just want to run over real quick. These are mainly suboptimal. However, I understand that some cards like Gremory being at like $30 a pop and Gold Rush Ghost being $30 a pop. Mukon, he's newer, but he is kind of needed for the deck, so like his supply might be on the lower end, but he is a gold, so he should still be like somewhat easily able to be found. I want to say Tartarus is, even though he's cheap, I want to say finding copies of him is getting harder to find as well. So yeah, we'll kind of go over some alternative options. The first one is Grave Desecration. It's just a 1-cost spell or amulet, that on Fanfare you put the top 2 cards of your deck into your cemetery, and then you can pay 2 and sacrifice the amulet to select a departed follower in the cemetery and add it back to your hand. So mainly you probably want to grab back Crispy on the Patch, but there are other options like Ilgano, but kind of whatever the situation calls for. I just want to specify this card, Emperor's Command, is the exact same thing as Grave Desecration. You can even see that it says the name here. It is just a reprint. It's not even a reprint because it came out in the same set, but it's just a reskin of Grave Desecration. So between the 2 copies, you can only have up to 3 in the deck. So you could do all 3 of one of one and 2 of the other, or 2 of one and 1 of the other. So just kind of keep that in mind between these 2. Another option is Poltergeist here, which is basically like a diet version of Grave Desecration and Emperor's Command, because all it does is you pay 1 to bury the top 2 cards of your deck. It's a spell, not an amulet, so you don't have the ability to pay 2 and crack it to grab a departed follower back. But it is quick, so that's something to take note. It's not a huge deal, but it is just something. Personally, in my opinion, between these 2, I like Emperor's Command and Grave Desecration more, especially since if you don't want to pay the 2 to sacrifice the Grave Desecration to grab something back, you could always bury with the Great Pit Corpse, you can always bury the amulet and just not have to pay the 2 to get rid of Grave Desecration. Up next, now this one's a little bit of a, like, if you're desperate and you just have like literally no other options, is Spartoy Sergeant. He's a 2-cost 2/3 that just on Fanfare you bury the top 2 cards of your cemetery. He is departed, so that helps with your departed count with Tartarus the Tormentor, unlike Gremory, because Gremory is not departed, she is just demon. However, Gremory is still preferred because not only do you get to get departed cards in the cemetery on her initial Fanfare summon, but then when you res her back, you get to bury 2 more, which gives you more departed chances to get cards in the cemetery that are departed. But Spartoy Sergeant, super cheap, super common, just if you just need something that is like almost like Gremory. Next up is, I'm going to skip one card for a second and just go to Do Blame, Duke and Dame, and this one's a really solid card regardless. It does come in the starter deck as well, so it should be easy to pick up. It is a 2-cost 2/2 that you can bury the top card of your deck with. It evolves for 1 into a 3/3 that on evolve you can deal 2 damage to an enemy follower, but if you have Necrocharge 10, you deal 4 instead. Just a really good alternative option where you can still bury a little bit, and it's just a little more board control if your opponent's kind of spamming followers more early game. Do Blame helps just deal with that with the 4 damage and the rush. The other option is Adherent of Screams. It's a 2-cost 2/2 that is last words bury the top card of your deck. So instead of Do Blame, where he buries upon summon, Adherent of Screams buries on death. He evolves for 1, again, into a 3/3, but he, on evolve, you can either deal 2 damage to an enemy follower on the field with the second effect, or select a follower in your cemetery with Rule and I in its name and summon it. This is Rule and I, which we'll get to in a second. So it has a little bit more of a Adherent of Screams is a little more flexible in what you can do, because you can either deal 2 damage or res back a Rule and I, which Rule and I, for what it's worth, has 2 attacks, so it's essentially like the same thing. But the one thing I've always had a gripe with Adherent of Screams is the burying is on last words, which for the theme of the cards, I understand why they do it this way, but I just usually like the instant satisfaction of just burying a card with Do Blame, and like, let's say it's Necrocharge 10 and it's a Gremory, you could be like, perfect, pay 1, bring Gremory back and keep milling. Where with Adherent of Screams, you have to kind of wait until he dies, which might be during your opponent's turn, so you're just kind of sitting with play points you couldn't even use sometimes. So just kind of moving along with the first effect here of summoning a card with Rule and I in its name. That's another card option here for your deck. Rule and I is a 2-cost 2/1 that has Rush and Assail. And on Fanfare, you can select an enemy follower on the field, and if there's at least 3 cards in your field named Rule and I, Echoing Scream, destroy it and deal 3 damage to its leader. I will get around to what Rule and I, Echoing Scream is in a second. And then the last words, which is more prevalent of what happens, is you put a Scream Diffusion token into your EX area and bury the top card of your deck. The token, the Scream Diffusion token, is a 2-cost spell that says summon a Rule and I, Echoing Scream token, so it's another token that we'll get to in a second. For every 5 cards in your cemetery, that card is this. It is basically the same stats as the Rule and I Screaming Silence, but it doesn't have any other effect other than just the Rush and Assail. So the whole cycle with these cards is you play Rule and I, you rush it into something that dies, you get the Scream Diffusion token. You, later on in the game, once you have Necrocharge 15, you play this to get 3 copies of Rule and I, Echoing Scream. Then you could either replay a new Rule and I, Screaming Silence, or play Adherent of Screams and evolve it to bring back Rule and I. And then because he would see the 3 token versions of himself, he would destroy an enemy follower and deal 3 damage to the leader. It's a little bit of a convoluted combo, but what is nice, and I feel like the only like real solid redeeming quality of it, is as long as you have Necrocharge 15 where you can summon 3 Rule and I Echoing Screams for 2 play points, that is 6 total play points in cost. So then you can pay 1 and tap the 3 Rule and I's to maneuver the train. So effectively for 3 play points, you can maneuver the train. Seems real solid on paper. In practice, though, at the moment with the current meta, it probably is just not the strongest effect you can do, but it is not like a bad effect. It feels like maybe you got to reach for it a little bit, which might be true depending on what your hand and situation is. But like I said, these are kind of budget options, so this is not optimal, but they are just like other options. Linkstaff Necromancer is very similar to Mukon as an option. It's a 3-cost 3/3 that on summon you get to bury card, top card of your deck. She evolves for 1 into a 4/4 that says on evolve, select a departed follower that costs 3 or less in your cemetery and summon it. So again, it's very similar to Mukon. I think I even saw a deck list that ran both Linkstaff and Mukon, which is kind of crazy, but yeah, usually this is kind of like the secondary option, and she should be like dirt cheap and easy to find. Another option is Air Chucker. She's a 3-cost 3/3 that races for 1. So she doesn't evolve, she races. This effect, these 2 lines here, you can effectively ignore with her because you're never going to have enough Uma cards to have that trigger. And her on race says select up to 1 enemy follower on the field and deal it 3 damage and give this follower +1/+1 and bury the top 2 cards of your deck. So it helps with board control, helps with clearing out an enemy follower. And do keep in mind, it says select up to 1 enemy follower. So even if you don't have an enemy follower on the field, you could still race her to make her a 4/4 and bury the top 2 cards of your deck. That is still able to be done. It doesn't say select 1 enemy follower, it says select up to, so 0 is a valid option with her. Coming back around here to Ceres, Blue Rose Maiden. She's also new. She is a 2-cost 1/3 that has Bane and Necrocharge 5. She gets Storm, so it's very easy to do. Usually you can get to this by like turn 3. So effectively, if you play her turn 2, she's not going to get Storm, but pretty much if you have like the right cards by turn 3, she could have Storm. And during your turn, whenever this card deals damage to an enemy leader, each opponent discards a card, and the discard is your opponent's choice. So keep that in mind. But what is nice with her is she is able to be res back with Demon Lord Ektar. The issue with her is she doesn't help with the mill at all, and she feels more of like a win more card. Like if you're already at the point where you can play this to make your opponent discard a card, you're probably at a point to just finish the game. So why make your opponent discard a card? But you know, it is kind of a scary threat turn 2 to just throw her on the board and be like, you have to play like a surefire bullet or something to deal with her, or not, you're going to be discarding a card next turn. And so kind of puts a little bit of like a red flag on the board. So yeah, just another alternative, decently cheap option at like $4. By the way, these prices are actually linked to TCG player prices, so they should be pretty accurate to what they are on the site. They are actually pulled straight from TCG player. Next up is Mischievous Zombie. This one I've actually seen played in main decks, so this is one of those weird ones where it's like you could play it, you could not play it, even if you're not on a budget. It's a 2-cost 2/2 that evolves for 2, which is kind of, I think, the thing that's unfortunate about this card that kind of holds it back. But we'll get to that in a second. The fanfare says discard a card, summon a ghost token, and if you discard a departed card, you get to draw a card. And Mischievous Zombie is a departed himself, so he does work and synergize well with himself. His on-evolve turns him into a 3/3, so that's kind of unfortunate that for 2 play points, you're only getting a +1/+1 in value. However, on evolve, you can select a ghost on your field and give it Bane. So if your opponent has some big follower for that's like 7 cost, you can just give it the ghost that you summon Bane and just run it into the 7 cost card and just insta kill it, and it's just not a problem. Otherwise, because of the ghost, like I said, he does work well with Great Pit Corpse, and you can heal with Mukon based on the ghost summoning. So I think that's kind of why he's mainly used with in the deck. And so yeah, I'm trying to think. And also, there is some cards that you just don't want in your hand. Like, for an example, like especially early on, if you have like Demon Lord Ektar in your hand, like you just don't want that in your hand early on. So you can just play like Mischievous Zombie for 2, just get rid of Ektar. It helps with your Necrocharge count, helps with your departed count, and you get to draw a card and get a ghost and just ping something for 1. Next up is Itsurugi, Eager Admirer. Now, this one might seem a little weird, but he is actually used in quite a few decks. There's a lot of toolboxing with this game, so it is all over the place. Like, there is like a core set of cards, but then it's like there's like good 10 to 12 slots that is very like flexible in what you want to throw in the deck. And I've seen Itsurugi as one of them. He is not a cheap option, as you can see, and his advanced form is okay. His advanced form is actually pretty cheap, but he himself is not cheap. But this is just another card that can be played depending on just what you want to do. But anyways, Itsurugi is a 2-cost 3/2 that I'm going to skip the advance part for a second and just say on fanfare, you put a Wolfling Struggle token into your EX area, which is nothing like super crazy. It's just a 0-cost spell that says deal 1 damage to an enemy follower, and you may discard a card. It is optional, but if you do, you get to mill the top card of your deck. So it can help with your Necrocharge. It can help with like Demon Lord Ektar being in your hand and you don't want him to be. It can help with, you know, things like Odile Black Swan being in your hand but you don't want her to be. Things like that. It can help with your Necrocharge count and just situate your cemetery better. Back to the base form though, the fanfare, or sorry, not the fanfare, the advance says for 4 play points you can banish this and you summon Itsurugi Paradise's End from your Evolved deck, but you can only activate this if you have 5 festive cards or 10 Abyss cards in your cemetery. The 5 festive cards is just never going to happen since Itsurugi is the only festive in the deck, but you just need basically Necrocharge 10 to play him. Paradise's End says he's a 6/5 that on Fanfare you can select up to 3 enemy followers on the field, deal 5 to the first and 2 to the other 2, and during your turn, whenever an enemy follower is put from the field into the cemetery, you deal 1 damage to its leader and give your leader 1 defense. So innately you think, okay, +3, -3, because you can deal 5 to 1, 2 to 2 others, so that would be 3 things you could kill potentially. It can potentially get up to 4 if you do kill 3 things, and then the last follower is a 1 defense follower, and you could just ping it with the Wolfling Struggle. But a lot of times, more times than not, you're going to need the Wolfling Struggle to ping that extra like 6 defense follower to finally kill it off. And then there is the like super Omega like mirror matchup situation where you kill everything but a Gold Rush Ghost. And because your opponent's Gold Rush Ghost would die during your turn for free, you just get to heal 1 and burn your opponent 1. That is like way more situational, but it is funny that it is like possible. So yeah, very flexible, good card. You could also, if you need to, crack a Bullet Bike on Itsurugi and give it rush and rush it into something if it's something you need to kill. So a lot of flexible options. And I guess he's not a bad APC token option either with 5 defense. Last one up on the top row here is Whispers of a Dream. It's a 2-cost spell that says quick, select an enemy follower that costs 3 or less on the field, destroy and bury the top card of your deck. This card is more of a meta call. Right now, 7 cost is really good right now, and so there's just going to be matches where you're just not going to have a lot of options to play Whispers. But if your locals is, let's say, just they don't have 7 costs and they're just kind of more the older formats where like 3 costs or less are just very rampant, you can still run Whispers and just mill and, you know, have some good board control. This is more of a meta call of just not having this card in the deck, but it's still not bad just in general. Let's see, moving on. I did kind of go out of order here, but let's go to Blaster Dark for a second. He is a 3-cost 3/3, so this one is very similar to Air Shucker. He has single drive, which is irrelevant since you're not playing Vanguard. But on Fanfare, you bury the top 2 cards of your deck, and he evolves for 1. And his on-evolve is you select an enemy follower on the field and deal 3 damage. And you can pretty much ignore anything past that because the rest just says deal 1 more for every 5 Shadow Paladins in Cemetery, which is just not going to happen. So it's very similar to Air Shucker in the sense of, you know, it's a 3-cost 3/3. You can evolve / race in the case of Air Shucker to mill 2, deal 3 to something, and, you know, they get rush. I would say in general, Air Shucker is the more budget option. You can see it's like 39 cents. Blaster Dark is a little more expensive at 18. However, the one thing I will give Blaster Dark is the mill 2 is free. You don't have to evolve him in order to get the mill 2 like you have to do with Racing Air Shucker. But that is not usually a thing that makes or breaks games. It is just something I just wanted to specify, though. Last is Duramente. One more Uma Musume follower. She's a 5-cost 4/4 that you can race for 1, and on race, she gets +1/+1, and that is pretty much all it ends. The main reason why you play her is twofold, but first is the Fanfare, where you can select an enemy follower on the field, destroy it, deal 2 damage to its leader, give your leader 2 defense, and bury the top 2 cards of your deck. This really works with really tall pieces like Burnite and 7-cost Dragon. You can just pop her instantly and just move on with your life. And she is a 5-cost, so you could pay 1 and tap her to maneuver the train. I've also had games where on turn 6, like, you have ice in hand, but you don't want to play ice on turn 6 because it kind of feels bad because you can't maneuver the train. So I've had games where it's like if my opponent has 2 cards on board and it's turn 6, I just play Duramente, pop 1, race her, give her the +1/+1, and then just rush her into the other follower. And obviously with the heal 2, deal 2, and mill 2. So just another alternative option I don't feel like is a bad option for this format, but if you can, it's just kind of not play because there's just other options. So that's kind of the last bit of it. as you can see, just even I guess these are all just one copies I just put in here just for the moment, but you can see even just like with one copies, that's just like $83, even if you just bought one of each, which is not what you need anyways. Probably the biggest thing is just Itsurugi being the most expensive, but I just wanted to, I don't normally do this, but I wanted to at least give players alternative options that are getting into the game that want something that are just at least similar, but don't have to be like the more top tier choices for the meta right now, especially if you're new and you're just getting into it, you're kind of enjoying the game, you're just trying to like get weird, funny interactions. The I guess there was one last combo I missed, was if you, with Odile Black Swan, I forgot to mention that she doesn't obviously have any way to swing on summon except for the Storm and Echo Charge 20. However, if you do have a Bullet Bike from previous turns on the board, you could crack the Bullet Bike on Odile to give her Rush. She won't get the +1 attack, but she'll get the Rush. So on summon, she could deal 2 to the board, deal with some threats, and then you could give her Rush and swing at an engaged follower, which on strike will deal 2 to the board as well and 2 to the leader. So it does help with some damage. It does help with wide boards. Like Forest likes wide boards with low defense followers. So that is just like one little last combo that works well with Odile. So that is pretty much it. If you are new, welcome. I hope you guys enjoy the game. If you're new to the channel, I just main Abysscraft. I don't do every class because I just don't have that much time in my life to afford the time and money for. But yeah, I hope this was at least, you know, helpful in kind of getting familiar with the deck, and hope you like, comment, and subscribe. We did just recently hit 150 subscribers, so thank you very much. I appreciate it, and yeah, have a great day, guys.